It was a trap, vicious, deliberate, and deadly. In the shadows of a luxury penthouse office, beneath recessed amber lighting and the distant hum of a city that never sleeps, a steel safe stood gaping open in Damian Cross's private study. Inside, stacks of illicit cash lay piled like blood-stained bricks of temptation, glinting beside folders marked with names that could end lives. He knew she would come here to clean. He knew her routine down to the second. The man, a Mafia boss hardened by decades of betrayal, stood concealed in the adjacent hallway, his steel blue eyes cold not with rage, but with grim certainty. Beside him, Evan Rourke waited in tactical silence, hand resting near his holster. And yet, as he watched his housemaid enter the room and freeze before the open safe, he never imagined that what would unfold in the next 60 seconds would completely shatter him, cracking open a conscience he thought he'd buried years ago. If you believe in second chances, in the quiet power of character, and in the strength of integrity that can change even the darkest hearts, then pause right now. Like this video, subscribe to let the world see that goodness still survives in places where brutality rules. The housemaid's name was Hannah Whitmore, 26, slender and exhausted, with soft hazel eyes that carried the weight of worry she never spoke. She had been working in the Cross estate for just over 9 months. With a younger sister fighting cancer and medical bills piling like tombstones, Hannah was the kind of woman who moved silently through desperation. Every morning she arrived before dawn, tying her brown hair back into a simple ponytail, slipping into her worn navy uniform, and beginning her work without complaint or question. To most of Damian's crew, she was invisible, a ghost behind polished marble and crystal decanters. But to Damian Cross, the ruthless boss who had built an empire on fear and calculated violence, Hannah was an anomaly that had begun to disturb him. Damian had spent most of his life taking what he wanted and destroying what threatened him. People had betrayed him, stolen from him, tried to kill him. His former partner sold him out to the feds. Trusted soldiers turned informants. Family became enemies. And so he built walls, steel ones around his vault and impenetrable ones around his soul. When Hannah arrived, there was something unsettling about her. She didn't flinch at raised voices. She didn't probe for information. She never stayed in rooms longer than necessary. And she was, by every surveillance report and background investigation, disturbingly clean. It unnerved Damian the way her honesty felt almost offensive, too genuine to be real. That's when Trent Mallory, his manipulative rival, planted the final seed of doubt. "Everyone has a price, Cross," Trent had sneered, leaning against the bar with that arrogant smirk. "Even your little saint, test her before she becomes your weakness." The words festered, so Damian devised the trap. One Tuesday morning, just before Hannah was scheduled to dust the study, Damian arranged the safe to be left wide open. He had instructed Evan to position hidden cameras at 3 angles. Every breath, every movement, every choice would be recorded. No excuses, no mercy. He wanted to see what Hannah would do when faced with life-changing temptation. Would she crack? Would she take just enough to save her sister? Or was she truly as incorruptible as she appeared? Hannah entered the room exactly at 7:48 a.m. She didn't notice the safe at first, not until she turned toward the mahogany desk and the morning light caught the open steel door. She stopped mid-motion, her cleaning cloth frozen in her gloved hand. Her eyes went to the safe, then darted quickly toward the doorway. No one. Complete silence. Her breath hitched audibly in her throat, and for a long, agonizing moment she stood paralyzed, staring at the open vault as if unable to process what she was seeing. From his hidden vantage point, Damian's jaw tightened. He watched as she approached slowly, cautiously. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the money stacks, then pulled back sharply. Instead, she reached for the cloth, still clutched in her hand, and began gently wiping the safe's outer edge, careful not to disturb a single bill inside. She didn't count the money. She didn't glance around, nervously calculating risk. She simply cleaned the steel surface with the same quiet precision she used everywhere else in the penthouse. And then something completely unexpected happened. Hannah's eyes caught on something wedged behind the cash bundles. A folded piece of paper. She hesitated, then carefully reached between the stacks and pulled it free. It was a hospital invoice, creased and worn, stamped "Final Notice" in angry red letters. Her sister's name was printed across the top. Hannah's face crumpled for just a second. She glanced at the hallway once more, as if making absolutely certain she was alone, and pressed the invoice to her chest. Her lips moved in what looked like a desperate, silent prayer. Then, gently, with shaking hands, she folded the paper and placed it into her apron pocket. She closed the safe door with a soft, decisive click. Not a single dollar had moved. Not a single bill had been touched. Damian stepped back deeper into the shadows, his breath caught somewhere between his throat and his chest, stunned, shaken. He wasn't sure what he had expected, a quick grab, a stolen stack, maybe even a moment of internal struggle, but what he saw was something far more devastating. Restraint born not from fear of consequences, but from a moral code so deeply rooted it defied survival instinct itself. He turned and walked away before she could sense his presence, before she could see the crack forming in the armor he'd spent a lifetime forging. That evening, Damian couldn't sleep. He sat alone in his study, replaying the footage over and over, the trembling hands, the prayer, the invoice pressed to her heart, the safe untouched. The weight of it settled on his chest like a truth he had spent decades running from. It was no longer about the test. It was about her, about the kind of character he had convinced himself was extinct in a world built on greed and violence. He realized he had judged everyone through the blood-stained lens of his own betrayals, and in doing so, nearly destroyed the one thing his empire could never buy: genuine integrity standing quietly under his own roof. The next morning, Hannah arrived to find Margaret, the house manager, waiting for her with an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note in Damian's sharp, controlled script. "Integrity cannot be bought, but loyalty can be earned. Your sister deserves a fighting chance, so do you. The enclosed is not charity, it's respect. Use it without guilt. You've proven something I stopped believing in years ago." Attached was a cashier's check enough to cover every medical bill, every late rent payment, every sleepless night. Hannah sank into the nearest chair, her hands trembling violently as tears streamed down her face. She pressed the letter to her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. In that moment, the crushing weight she had carried for years lifted, not because she had begged or compromised, but because she had chosen to do what was right when no one was supposed to be watching. That weekend, something unprecedented happened. Damian Cross appeared at Hannah's modest apartment, not with Evan and armed security, but alone. He sat at her small kitchen table, met her sister pale and fragile but smiling, and brought a folder thick with documents. A new home in a protected neighborhood, full medical coverage through his private network. A new position: household operations director, generous salary, flexible hours to care for her family. But more than money or titles, he offered something he hadn't given anyone in 20 years. His trust. And in a voice rougher than usual, he said, "You reminded me that not everything in this world has to be taken by force. Some things, some people, are worth protecting instead. Sometimes the truest tests aren't passed with applause, but with quiet, unseen choices made in the loneliness of moral crossroads. Sometimes the most powerful people aren't those who rule through fear, but those who live with integrity even when survival demands otherwise." If this story touched something in you, please like, share, and subscribe to the Kindness Matters stories. We tell true emotional stories that reveal the power of character in a world that often forgets it exists. Drop a comment below if you believe that even one act of integrity backed by kindness can change the trajectory of a life. And before you go, tell us in the comments, what would you do if no one was watching and everything you needed was within reach?